Uh,
There you go. Got it.
all right. Greetings and welcome to Cannaspirations podcast episode number 2. I'm your host, Warren Harris. I'm the VP of Regulatory Compliance at Cannaspire, and I'm joined by my faithful co-host, Beck Selman, subject matter expert and technical writer here with me on the compliance team. Today, we are joined by Tony Gallo, the founder and managing partner of Sapphire Risk, a security consulting firm that specializes in the cannabis industry. Welcome, Tony. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Can
you.
you take a moment and tell us a little of your background with Sapphire Risk and some of the services you provide your clients?
Sure. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you. Being the number 2 on your show, I feel very honored about that. So my name is Tony Gallo. I'm the managing partner for Sapphire Risk Advisory Group. We are the oldest national security consulting company. We celebrated our 10th anniversary in August. And we work with about 800 clients during that time in about 37 states, focusing on 3 aspects: the helping with the application part of it, designing security, physical security for locations. We've just opened our 155th cannabis location in the United States. And then also the most important thing is dealing with policies and procedures when it comes to security for companies that are in business and want to remain in business. And we have a pretty robust policies with that.
Thanks, Tony. It's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Our second show, as you pointed out. Really honored to have somebody so experienced and knowledgeable in the business to work with and to provide us information. So really curious, what are some of the biggest questions you get from clients and biggest concerns you see in the cannabis industry right now?
It's very interesting. Sometimes the questions really don't have a lot connection to what we see as the biggest problem. So a lot of times a client that comes our way is very focused on getting their license, which they should be, very focused on opening up their business, which is what they should be. But really what they kind of lose focus on is ensuring that they have the best programs in place. It could be, we focus obviously on security, but the compliance is a big program, which I know your company does a great job doing. So we see a lot of companies that once they open, you find that they've had these deficiencies that we see in how they go about running their day-to-day programs. They might have designed it and passed the state inspection, but didn't realize that it really didn't help them with their business, and that affects their margins. So, I think a lot of times I would say, the one of the keywords that I always see is that, and I always focus on is, that deficiency, not being in compliance, I see as a major concern that a lot of cannabis business owners don't realize until it's a little too late.
That's a great point. A lot of times we're called in after the fact. That's what we specialize in, but we're called in after the fact to fix the deficiency. On the compliance side, we see correction letters from the regulatory bodies. We see documentation and record keeping problems, employee citations regarding relating to employee conduct, such as one example was a dispensary delivery driver left a vehicle running out in front of a business, and somehow the OCM caught him, fined the business, but it led to an overhaul of their training, their record keeping, their standard operating procedures had to be rewritten, and their training programs had to be redone, and the employees had to be retrained. In this case, we have an example of a letter from the OCM, and in this case, they just did an on-site random inspection. They started out with going right to their documentation and record keeping. Number one, found that they didn't have an updated security plan, and we came in and developed did a risk assessment and helped them develop that. And just on that point of these deficiencies, I really find that a lot of these companies, Tony, maybe you see this as well, they train one time at the very beginning, and then they tend to walk away. And so this is actually a great segue because I know that, Sapphire Risk, you guys have started tackling sort of this deficiency in training. So I was wondering if maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the security training courses that you offer and how they can keep these operators ahead of these sort of deficiencies with their employees saying, oh, I just didn't know what I was supposed to do.
Sure, sure. So we have designed, and this comes about. I've been in the retail security field over 25 years, worked for companies like Sears and Macy's, and then worked for specialty chains for the last 20 years of that. And again, one of the biggest deficiencies, one of the biggest problems I see is a business that is now open and is not in compliance. I know, like I said, that's a very key point. And a lot of times that centers around employees not properly trained. And I think you lose that understanding that your employees are your most important asset in any retail business. And your focus of opening, your focus of designing your facility, your focus of selling your product, without good employees, you're really not going to ever be successful. And we have a program that helps you retain that, those employees, giving them the tools. I hear so many times after a situation occurred, whether it was an armed robbery or a break-in or something, that I was never trained about that. No one ever told me what to do if someone had a heart attack or if there was a shoplifter or something like that. And a lot of times, we see that, and the states require that. You'll see that, there are several states that require continuous education, but even if the state didn't require it, that business, that business model of trying to reduce your losses, when you first start off, a lot of our training we do now on the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, because they've been in business for 5, 6, 7 years. Now they're beginning to realize that they're not getting the margins that they thought. And maybe there's something going on. Maybe they need to have someone come out and do a risk assessment like you said you do, or someone do a compliance audit or someone doing a security review, and again, we work with many insurance companies. The insurance companies call it an account in duress, which means they filed 1 or 2 or 3 claims. They're now in jeopardy of losing their insurance, or the rates are going to go really high. And we'll come into that facility and we'll look at that because the insurance obviously is important for them, and see what we can do differently. And then again, that liability, think about it this way: you don't train your employees, something happens, and now there's a lawsuit. First thing they're going to be asking you for is that training manual, or what's the compliance program, or what kind of audits have you conducted, or what could you have done to reduce or mitigate whatever could have occurred. I do expert witness testimony in retail, and that's the number one thing that's always requested: is show us how you trained that employee, that they knew not to do this or they knew to do this. And again, last the point there is that saving that time and that stress for that employee, with that training, give them those tools, make them successful. Next slide. So again, like I was mentioning before, some key points that we see as deficiencies that aren't being done. Are your employees trained on what to do if there was a robbery? How are they to act? What do you want them to do? What do you want them not to do? What do you want them to do if there was a shoplifter? What if they see an employee stealing or handing out merchandise to, cannabis to a friend, or not ringing all the sales? There are some robust point of sale systems out there that can identify that kind of fraud. Physical security. I think Warren Beck, I think you agree with me, huge deficiency sometimes in physical security. You may pass your state inspection actually, or worse, if you don't have good procedures in place when it comes to physical security and you're being inspected, that you may not pass that inspection. Now that inspector may not be back for 2 to 3 or 4 weeks. You're still paying insurance, you're still paying rent, you're still paying those employees for those 3 or 4 weeks, but you have not opened until you passed the inspection, and it's because you missed 3 or 4 cameras, or you missed an alarm system, or you missed this or that. And that's a huge hit. Not just the fact that you try and do it. Sometimes people do try and do it cheap. Sometimes people just don't know that they're not in compliance, and that's a key thing. And obviously, how do you handle cash? How do you verify ID? What are the procedures? There have been companies in the last 10 years, big companies, multi dispensary chains, that have gone out of business simply because they did not follow the state's rules and follow the compliance of what was going on in that state, and they lost their license. They 20 something stores went out of business. Next slide. So, like I was saying, I think that I think Warren, I think you've done so many compliance out there, and we piggybacked a lot with that. And I think, Beck, you also can agree that this is obviously a high risk cash business. So everyone knows that, even if it isn't high risk, 10 years ago it was mostly cash. Now you can be using debit cards, and sometimes it could be 60 to 7% of that may be non-cash. People still perceive it as cash, a high cash business. So when we look at our other clients, we do high risk businesses, pawn shops and jewelry stores and convenience stores. People have that perception that there's a lot of cash. So people are going to do something wrong, even if there is that cash. And then obviously the margins, 80%, 80 to 90% of all the losses in the dispensary, 80 to 90% of all the losses is internal theft. So you're focusing sometimes in the wrong areas, 80 to 90% of that, and not training your employees, not getting them that knowledge, not having them be able to follow up on, compliance audits or what they need to do, inventory control of that nature. That's an important thing. And, sometimes even the training, who does the training? Who trains the trainer? Is it somebody that understands what to do when it comes to communicating? So we'll talk in my field about the security. Is it a real security trainer, or is it somebody who maybe went to a couple courses and is not giving the right communication? Because again, giving wrong information in a lawsuit is not it's going to hurt you. And you would have been better off not giving them that information than giving them the wrong instructions. For instance, you should never chase shoplifters outside of the store, something of that nature. How do you document them? How do you keep that record keeping? I think that a lot of the times when I'm talking to people who do compliance reviews, they'll come back and they'll say that documentation's not there, that record keeping's not there. Oh, we trained everybody on robbery awareness. Well, when did you do that? I don't know. We did it sometime 2 years ago. Or well, who did the training? I don't know. Or who took the training? I don't know. Whoever was there, but you have no records, you have no documentation, you have no way of defending yourself. Again, whether that's a lawsuit, whether that's an insurance claim, or whether it's just people where you realizing from a compliance point of view that you didn't give them those tools. And again, the standardizing that education over multiple stores, sometimes it's very difficult. We do a lot of MSOs nationwide, and the training that occurs, in one store should occur in the next store. Again, I'm harping upon it, but it's important because you can't go back and redo this. If you train all your employees in store A one way and all your employees in store B another way, you're going to wind up having to defend that if you ever had a situation. Next slide. So obviously, like I said, the importance of tracking, there are states out there, Missouri, Ohio, New Jersey, Nevada, just to name a few, Illinois, that you have to do continuous training. you have to be able to schedule, and you have to be able to keep that knowledge and keep that record keeping. And then, obviously the milestones of that, and then the morale. I mean, if you work for a company, you want to feel you're part of that company. And we preach that in the cannabis industry since day one, that, in some ways we're a family, and in retail, you want to be that family. So why not give them the tools for that? Next slide. So really, I will pass that back on to you, Warren and Beck. I know that regulations are constantly changing. I know that's very difficult. We see that all the time, where a whole store has been trained in one procedure, and that procedure changed a year ago, and nobody understood that. The limitation of how much cannabis you can buy, and things of that nature. So I'm going to pass it back to you to talk a little bit about regulations.
Yeah, that is just,
Yeah, I mean,
80 to 90% of theft is internal. And I mean, I've seen it in every industry I've worked in, retail, food service. You see it in manufacturing. I mean, everywhere you work, you see it, and it's just incredible. But it's really great work by you and your team. I've been through some of the training, your my Sapphire training program online, and it's fantastic to just have all that kind of training available at your convenience. Makes it easier for the managers to train their staff. As regulations change, as your employees come and go, you've got that training right at your convenience for retraining annually, especially. Are there any potential, you talked some about how the regulations changing all the time. Are there any big changes in the industry that businesses should start preparing for now that could cost them a lot of money?
Well, from a security point of view, we keep focus on that. I know you guys do such a broader look at all the regulations, and where, there's a lot of times that things are happening outside of the cannabis security industry that we're not aware of until you bring it to our attention, or we see it occur. The one thing that I'm starting to see more and more of is the focus on how cash and how cannabis products are stored at night. If you look at the cannabis industry, it started on the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and it migrated over in the last, say, 10 years to the New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania markets, and Massachusetts. And what you see on the East Coast is a much more strict procedures when it comes to how to store your cannabis at night and how to store your cash at night. And you don't see that regulation as much on the West Coast, which is now changing when it comes to, for instance, when a few years ago there were the riots that occurred, and best to our best knowledge, we knew of 83 dispensaries that were breached during those robberies, during the lootings that occurred. And of those 83, 23 of them, they actually got into these safes. And of those 23, all 23 of them were safes that would not pass East Coast regulations right now, because they were gun safes that you would buy at Costco and Walmart or whatever. And I can go to Home Depot and have a saw and cut through. And those 23 were the ones that were attacked. So that's kind of important, of not only, being in compliance, but understanding maybe the state's compliance rules are good for the state, but is it going to keep you in business? Are you, I hate getting that phone call when you tell me your employee just stole $100,000 and we should have put a lock on the door. Well, we should have put a lock on the door before he stole $100,000 worth of your product. So, that's what I see a lot when it comes to regulations.
That's a killer point, because I just love the fact that just because it's compliant with the regulations doesn't mean it is good enough to protect the continuity of your business, right? And so I've seen it to where, sure, all the cameras, all of the security regulations, they meet the standards of the state. And then a theft happens, and it turns out that the camera didn't really pick up much, and you have almost nothing to go off of in terms of trying to backtrack and figure out, where did these bad guys even get in from, and how do you fix it? And then really the worst sin in compliance that you mentioned is just having nothing in place at all, right? Because it really comes down to good faith in the industry to a certain extent, that you've been trying, that you've been establishing records of training, maintaining schedules for retraining. And at least then, if you have the horrible thing that happens and, something goes really wrong with your business, it can make the difference of, did I lose my license, or was it just a very, very bad day? And now I've got a framework in place that I can start building off of to, try and do corrective actions and fix something. Whereas if you had no planning and you had nothing, there's nothing to correct. And the risk to your license at that point is very, very real. So this is all to say, Tony, thank you so much for walking us through the training. Here is this QR code. Test your security knowledge with the mysappphiretraining.com. His group has offered a really robust, really sleek and streamlined training platform. And we've worked with them on a number of clients all over the East Coast and nationally. And we're going to see more and more training become required by the states. Florida requires GMP. New York requires GMP. New Jersey has 8 hours of employee training. New York has worker OSHA health and safety. It's coming for every state that cannabis is in. So be ready and talk to some experts that aren't just going to make you compliant with the code, but actually be good enough so that if something happens, you planned ahead for the rainy day and you're not scrambling. So, right. Tony, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, I appreciate it very much. You know how much I think highly of your company and what you do and how important it is for the industry for it to be successful.
Thank you so much.
Completely agree.
Yep. Check out mysappphiretraining.com and remember Sapphire Risk Advisory Group for all of your security needs in the cannabis industry. And Cannaspire, come visit us, come have a consultation call with us if you need any compliance. Or cultivation or manufacturing or dispensary consulting, we're here for you.
Thank you.